Welcome to Film and Page. I'm Dominic. It's another year in the can, and it's time for another top 5 books of the year. However, this year my top 5 list is a little different from previous years, as 2024 was an extremely busy year for me work-wise. I had, for the most part, put my life on hold for work. I only made a handful of YouTube videos. However, work wasn't the only reason for this. Also, I didn't get to read many books. I usually read on average 10 books a year. Some years it's more, sometimes a bit less. This year I read only 5. So this video will be more of a ranking of the books I read than a top 5. Because if I had read 10 or more, at least one book for sure, and maybe 2 more would not be on this list. With that said, let's get into the video. In the number 5 spot is Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles, originally published in May of 1950. The Earthmen came by the handful, then the hundreds, then the millions. They swept aside the majestic, dying Martian civilization to build their own homes, shopping malls, and cities. Mars began as a place of boundless hopes and dreams, a planet to replace an Earth sinking into waste and war. It became a canvas for mankind's follies and darkest desires. Ultimately, the Earthmen who came to conquer the red gold planet awoke to discover themselves conquered by Mars. Lulled by its ancient enchantments, the Earthmen learned, at terrible cost, to overcome their own humanity. This was a book that I've been looking forward to reading for some years now, as Ray Bradbury wrote one of my favorite science fiction books next to Dune of all time, Fahrenheit 451. However, this book I didn't really care for, and I found it hard to get through. This is one book on this list that if I had read more books this year, it wouldn't be on here. So by default, it gets the bottom slot on the list. Now, I will say this though. I'm not against revisiting this book in the future for a reread. I remember the first time I read Fahrenheit 451. I thought it was really boring and didn't care for it. It wasn't until I let the story percolate in my head and then read it again some years later that the story really clicked for me. So that might be the case for The Martian Chronicles as well. In the number 4 spot is the Star Trek Deep Space Nine book Avatar, book 1 of a 2-book series, written by S.D. Perry and published in May of 2001. In an uneasy ceasefire following the Dominion War, a surprise attack cripples Deep Space Nine, killing hundreds and threatening the peace of the galaxy, as Colonel Kara Nerys and her fellow survivors struggle to prevent all-out war and protect Captain Sisko's unborn child, and Captain Picard and his crew make a startling discovery that could forever alter the destiny of all concerned. As a fan of Star Trek, and DS9 being one of my favorites in the franchise, this book was a fun peek at how the story could have continued after the events of the TV series, with some of the characters having moved on to different places, and having Kara Nerys now in command of the station. This was the second book I read in 2024, and it was a solid, entertaining read, although I find it strange reading a DS9 story without Captain Sisko. I haven't read a lot of Star Trek books in my life, but I'm looking to change that in the future. Besides The Martian Chronicles, this is the only other science fiction book I read this year. Now, in the number 3 spot, we have The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson, published August 2005. It is the first book in the Millennium Trilogy. Harriet Vanger, scion of one of Sweden's wealthiest families, disappeared over 40 years ago. All these years later, her aged uncle continues to seek the truth. He hires Mikael Blomqvist, a crusading journalist recently trapped by a libel conviction, to investigate. He is aided by the pierced and tattooed punk prodigy Lisbeth Salander. Together, they tap into a vein of unfathomable inequity and astonishing corruption. This book was a little off the beaten path from what I usually read, as I like to branch out once in a while to read different genres, with this one being a crime thriller. And even though I didn't read many books this year, I'm still certain this one would have made my top 5. I've always enjoyed these types of stories with these Nordic settings. The wintry background just seems to add something to them. I also enjoyed the 2011 American film based on this book. I even went to see its 2018 sequel, The Girl in the Spider's Web, in the theater with my girlfriend, and actually liked that film quite a bit more than the first one. There were a couple of nitpicks I had with the story, but for the most part, I enjoyed it. It had me thinking about it long after I'd finished reading it. It poses some interesting questions. One being, how responsible is a person for their own actions, despite what kind of environment they were brought up in? It's something I won't go into in this video, but I still plan on doing a review of this book in the near future. If you decide to read this book, I will say this, that it is very heavy-handed in its politics, which usually I find to be a turnoff, but in this case, it works in the story's favor. Not only that, it deals with some very heavy-handed subject matter, so you want a chaser after you're done, like a Star Wars, Star Trek book, or some kind of light read. In the number 2 spot, we have The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, published in 2001. Barcelona, 1945. A city slowly heals from its war wounds, and Daniel, an antiquarian book dealer's son, who mourns the loss of his mother, finds solace in a mysterious book entitled The Shadow of the Wind by one Julian Carax. But when he sets out to find the author's other works, he makes a shocking discovery. Someone has been systematically destroying every copy of every book Carax has written. In fact, Daniel may have the last of Carax's books in existence. Soon, Daniel's seemingly innocent quest opens a door into one of Barcelona's darkest secrets, an epic story of murder, madness, and doomed love. This was the first book I read in 2024, and I even managed to get a review of it up on YouTube. I really enjoyed this book. The characters were very well written and distinct, with my 2 favorite characters being Daniel's best friend, Ferran Romero de Torres, and the story's main antagonist, Francisco Javier Fumero, the corrupt police inspector. What a juicy villain he was for the story's main character to go up against. I enjoyed the style of writing as it had a unique feel to it, and seemed to stand out from most books I've read. Also, the mystery of the story was very good. I also loved the time period and setting of the story. It really helped give it this noir feeling, being set in Barcelona of the 1940s. This book, much like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, was me venturing out and trying something different, which, like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I really enjoyed. I also loved that it was a book about a book, and a story within a story. It involves used books and used bookstores, 2 things which I really love. There are 2 more books in the series that I might have to check out in the near future. However, let's get on with the number 1 pick, which is The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein, published in January of 2008. On the eve of his death, Enzo, a philosopher dog with a nearly human soul and an obsession with opposable thumbs, takes stock of his life. He recalls all that he and the Swift family have been through, the sacrifices his master Denny has made to succeed as an up-and-coming race car driver, the unexpected loss of Eve, Denny's wife, and the subsequent custody battle over their daughter Zoe, whose maternal grandparents pulled every string to gain custody. In the end, despite what he sees as his own limitations, Enzo comes through heroically to preserve the Swift family, holding in his heart the dream that Denny will become a racing champion with Zoe at his side. I managed to get a review out for this book as well in 2024, and it was easily the best one of the year. I read this book while I was on vacation, and I could not put it down. It was a page turner, and I read it in 2 days. I absolutely love this book. It was a book I had on my radar for years and years. Finally, I got around to reading it, and I was not disappointed. As I said in my review of this book, it has this almost self-help aspect to its story. It reminded me a little of The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman, with race car driving and racing in the rain as an obvious allegory for how a person should approach life. Never give up on your dreams and always keep moving forward. I found this book to be funny, sad, and uplifting. As cheesy as it sounds, I really felt like I was reading something special, a reading experience I will never forget, and that is why it is number 1 for books I read in 2024. Those were my top 5 books for 2024. And with that, hopefully I'll get to read more than 5 books in 2025. That's everything I have to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one. I'd like to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I appreciate you all in helping this channel grow. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded.